Morning and welcome to our, what would this number be, 19th session for the 21 indispensable qualities of a leader. Today's topic is servanthood, and glad to see many of you logging in here today. I think being on these live, you probably get more out of that and maybe helps with attention span and being involved. And of course, our chat room is always open. If you have questions or comments that you'd like to make, please add those to our chat. And then after the session, we're happy to stay on and visit a little bit more if you have some other questions. Today's topic is servanthood. And oh my, what a topic. I imagine all of you in your career would have examples of people that have been supervisors that you would say were great supervisors, and some that you would say that were bad supervisors. And now, while they may have their own special characteristics, I would guess that servanthood would be one of the ones that would apply there. I had a great boss who would always pitch in and do work with us lowly employees whenever something was needed. I remember him helping us move boxes and lift things one time. He was in a suit. The rest of us college kids were not. He was always more than willing to jump in. And then I had another boss who it seemed like nearly everything was beneath her to do. So it's quite a contrast. And part of that's all part of this topic of servanthood. Well, I'm glad that I don't have to talk 30 minutes on this subject. I'm glad that our guest speaker did prepare to do that. And Jackie Spainhauer will be leading our discussion today. Jackie is the County Engagement Specialist in Agriculture and the Environment in Harrison County. She actually covers Davies, Gentry, Harrison, and Worth County. Those are all in North Missouri. And as a reminder, because Jackie has led a session before, she has a bachelor's degree in art and design from Iowa State University and a master's degree in public management from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. And she's been with Extension now for getting close to 2 years, I think. Maybe a year and a half, 2 years. Prior to Extension, she was the executive director for the Northwest Missouri Regional Council of Governments. And I'm sure she had lots of opportunities to practice servanthood in that position. So, and if she's a county engagement specialist now, and that kind of comes with the territory as well. Jackie, I'm looking forward to what you have to share with us today about servanthood.
So awesome, David. I'm going to stop my video just so I can focus, as we talked about in my session 8. And it's funny, David, that you bring up Northwest Regional Council of Governments, because that's where I'm going to talk a little bit about today. And you're going to be surprised, because when I was there, I don't know that I was the best example of a servant leader. And so you're going to get my personal story today. And let me tell you, I've gotten very frustrated a couple times as I was writing this, because seeing how I acted in the past. So would love your feedback when I get through. But so yeah, this is the third quality I've presented in the series, and you've probably picked up that I look for personal examples. So today that's going to be myself. And I use that to better understand and examine Maxwell's lessons. And for this presentation on servanthood, what my hope is that you get out of it is that I inspire you to look back at yourself, at people from your past, as well as the people you know today, to see what you can learn from them. And David, I'm going to start out with a poll. Did you have a chance to put that in?
Yes.
Perfect. And so as David pulls up this poll, I want to stress to you that they are confidential. And so be as honest as you dare. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your servant leadership abilities or tendencies to be a servant leader? 1 being that you don't want to be a servant leader, and 5 being all in.
Well, and as you noted, Jackie, sometimes confession is good for the soul.
I am confessing today, David, let me tell you.
These are anonymous, so be honest with yourself and with others. And everybody jump on there and take the poll for us.
So we have at the poll ending, we have, or did you end the poll, David? Oh,
there we go.
All right. So it looks like we have a pretty strong 4. I take care of the people in my life and those that work for me. I can totally relate to that today because I would rate myself today around a 4 as well. But about 5 years ago, I probably would have given myself about a 2.5. And so it was a few lessons back that I think Pam Dutzman said that she chose to present on the topic of listening, not because she is a perfect listener, but because she saw this program as an opportunity to learn and study an area in her life that she wanted to improve. Being a servant leader is where I have struggled in the past, and I felt the same way as Pam. When I chose this topic to present today, I knew I had some learning to do, and learning I did. While preparing for the program today and reading chapter 19 of her book, I had an unbelievable aha, but very personal moment that I'm going to bite the bullet and share with you today. But first I realized I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this chapter, and I didn't feel that Maxwell was very wordy. In some of the chapters he goes on, and in this one I felt like he was very short and to the point. And so it left me seeking out other resources to help better understand and explain servant leadership, go more in depth. So I turned to one of my other favorite Maxwell books, which is the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, which I think some of you have talked about during this program. And specifically, I'll be referencing the 10th anniversary edition of his book. So David, if you want to go to the next slide. So as we read the chapter that we were assigned today, I like the quote he provided at the beginning. Servanthood isn't about position or skill, it's about attitude. And when I read and reread this quote, it made me think of my first experience as a leader or as a boss, far before I ever started working to improve my leadership skills. And I really got stuck on the words position and skill. So next slide. So I'm going to share with you first my personal experience. In 2014, I started a new job as the executive director of a small quasi-government agency, which was the Northwest Regional Council of Governments. And I probably came across to my staff in the same way as these ladies in this cartoon viewed the boss. Now, since it's a cartoon, it's supposed to be funny, but it kind of reflects what I thought about being a boss at the time. I thought as the boss, directing people was what I was supposed to do. I thought that I had to be in charge. I had to have the skills. And to me, I had to be the smartest one on the team because I held the position. So there's those words, skills and position. If you think back to the first presentation I gave for this series about competence and how much striving for competence has influenced my life, I believed as the boss, if I was competent and I didn't make any mistakes and I knew what I needed to know inside and out, that I could be the best leader for my organization. Well, I'm admitting today how wrong I was, because about 5 years ago, I wholeheartedly believed this. And I struggled every day while I worked for that agency. I had this idea that that's what a leader was. The boss was the leader was the boss. And I knew it was something that I could learn through professional development, or so I thought. And so I was always being the first one in the office and the last one to leave. And I pushed hard and I always tried to learn more so that I have a leg up and no surprises within my organization. I felt that being a great leader because I felt I was being a leader because I worked so hard, long days, on the weekends. Unfortunately, while I worked for this agency, I never did get it. And I was continually frustrated and couldn't figure out why I couldn't make things work, why I couldn't be happy in that position. And don't get me wrong, we were doing awesome things when I worked there. We collected wins for the communities that we represented all the time. We wrote $1 million grants and were awarded for infrastructure. We created new programs to serve our clients, and people were happy with our agency when I was there. But I wasn't. I was never happy. And then in 2017, I hit my wall. It was a tough year for me personally and professionally, and I burnt out completely with my job. I had been there for about 4 years now, and I decided to leave the agency, and I took a significant pay cut, and I went to work in the basement office of a state agency. And essentially, I tried to cut myself off from the people and communities that I had worked with for 15 years. These people meant so much to me, and I just had to get out. I went into hiding, and this was a break that I thought I needed. Well, let's just say that God works in mysterious ways, because it was while I was working in this agency as low man on the totem pole, I finally found what I was looking for. My supervisor asked me if I wanted to do some professional development on leadership. And he just happened to throw in a well-intentioned, "Oh, you could probably teach the class, Jackie." I went, right, because, I had just left the agency that I felt I completely failed as being their leader. And so I laughed it off and I signed up for the class. And David, if you want to go to the next slide. Light bulb. This was my light bulb moment. It was time for an attitude adjustment. Think back to that quote. It's all about attitude. The class that my supervisor had me sign up for was just the attitude adjustment I needed. It was 3 intense days of taking a deep dive into John Maxwell's The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Now, I know some of you have read the book alongside the 21 indispensable qualities that we're going over in this class, and I would highly recommend reading them together, or after this class, picking up the next one. Because for me, the idea of being a leader shifted from when our trainers in that class presented the very first law, which is known as the law of the lid. And in a nutshell, Maxwell writes that the lower the leader's ability is to lead, the lower the lid is on his potential, and in turn, the potential of his or her team. And that first lesson shot straight to my heart, that this was the first time in 30 plus years I had ever put leadership into perspective, that my actions that I thought I was giving all to my team may be suppressing their success as well as mine. And so in that class, we moved forward a few chapters in the training, and I got into the law of addition. And this is when it really, really hit home. And in his 10th anniversary rewrite, the law of addition, Maxwell states that it is basically an expanded chapter on servanthood. And it all comes down to adding value to other people. And that is what servanthood is about. And I realized in my entire career that this is what I had been missing the entire time. Now, looking back to my previous position at the regional council, where I thought I was the only way, our agency and our team could be successful, was if I was the most competent and most knowledgeable. I had to admit that I was wrong, and that's what I'm doing for you all today. I am admitting that I was wrong. And my light bulb moment is that it all comes down to serving others. And I learned that in that class. And after taking a step back, it dawned on me, if I had realized a few years back and adjusted my attitude then, I probably would still be the executive director at the regional council, because the work we did was good. But I am happy to be here at Extension. I'll throw that right now. I'll throw that in there because I love working for Extension as well. So David, if you go to the next slide, I just want to put this in there. This is the cover of the book of Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And in that book, he writes, it isn't how far we advance ourselves, but how far we advance others. And just to quick wrap up my information from this book, he goes on to say that 90% of people that can achieve advancing others or adding value to others does so intentionally. And in his own words in that book, he says he believes it because humans are naturally selfish. And he admits that he can be selfish. And when I read that, I realized just how selfish I had been. And so Maxwell says that to not be selfish, it requires us to get out of our comfort zones, and we have to change our thoughts and our actions, and we have to intentionally serve others. And that was just the slap in the face that I needed in order to do a 180 and change my perspective on leadership for good. So we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to get back into the 21 indispensable qualities of a leader book and into the meat of what Maxwell is writing in chapter 19. He starts it with a short story about U.S. Army General Norman Schwarzkopf, and he tells how Schwarzkopf left the safety and security behind, his power, his position, his rank, and he left it all on the battlefield to serve the people that served him. And I realized how excellent of an example of servant leadership Schwarzkopf was. I mean, he walked through a minefield to comfort and care for one of his soldiers, never minding his position or his own safety. But we're going to take it a different way in true Jackie Spainhauer fashion. For me to learn anything new, I have to apply it to something meaningful to me and to someone I know a little bit more intimately. So David, if you would go to the next slide. The man in this photo is Jim Wilson, and he is my dad. And I'm going to use him as an example as I move through the examination of Maxwell's chapter on servanthood. And because Maxwell was his example was a military general, I thought I'd share with you the only photo I have of my father in his military uniform. And, you know, honestly, I only know little bits and pieces of my dad's time in the service, but I do know that he volunteered to join the Army and go to Vietnam. He was not drafted. And he did this because he believed it was his duty as an American. And so before I was even born, my dad had a servant's heart. And family and friends and community were and still are everything to this man, even though for the most of my life I didn't realize it. And there is my aha and very personal realization in this program, in this presentation. Growing up with Jim, I never wanted for anything. I always felt loved, and I've always been part of a very strong family unit. However, I have to admit that I never saw much of my dad when I was younger, and it's because he was always working. He was working here or there or volunteering to do this or that. And my distorted view of reality as a kid and maybe into adulthood, I just figured he was a workaholic, and that was how he was wired, and he just had to be working all the time. And for the longest time, I assumed that that's where I learned my workaholic tendencies were from him. But as I read through the chapter and to prepare for this presentation, specifically reading Maxwell's list of what makes a true servant leader, I realized that Maxwell was describing my dad. And yes, I may have shed a tear or two as I realized that. So if we go to the next slide, David. So how does Maxwell describe a true servant leader? Maxwell says a servant leader puts others ahead of their own agenda. They put others ahead of their personal desires, ahead of their own safety, and they are aware of other people's needs. I don't know that ever in my life did I know Jim Wilson to have an agenda in anything. At any given time, he worked 3 jobs. When I was born in the mid-70s, he owned and operated a small locker plant. My mother told me that he would get up at all hours of the night to help people with their livestock if they had problems that they needed him to come and pick up a steer. And he worked unbelievable hours during the day at that facility to make it go. And as emerging regulations came down on processors, no different than the world we're living in today, he picked up a second job. And this job required him to walk 16 miles a day as a letter carrier for the U.S. Postal Service. And all of this he did while he continued to operate the locker full-time. And in between those 2 full-time jobs, he still had time to volunteer as an EMT and served as the chief of the volunteer fire department. Amazing man. And I remember that he was notorious for helping other local business owners with their businesses too. And I'm totally going to date myself. I know I told you I was born in the mid-70s, but do any of you remember when you used to get milk delivered right to your door? I do. I really do, because if our local milk delivery man wanted to go on vacation, my dad volunteered himself and my sister and I to run his route. And he would get us up at 3:30 in the morning to help him deliver milk all over Southwest Iowa. My sister Gina and I were the runners. Newspaper delivery person wanted to take a vacation? No problem. Jim would deliver newspapers at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so up until a few years ago, before his health took a turn for the worse, and this is my last example, but my best friend from high school that now owns a Godfather's Pizza restaurant couldn't find good employees to come to work. And it was typically the morning shift that she was struggling with. Well, guess what? Jim Wilson to the rescue. As a side note, some of you participating that know me, now do you see where I get my Jackie of all trades catchphrase? Totally from my father. I learned it from him. But what I realized when reading from this list, it wasn't that my dad was a workaholic. He was putting others ahead of his own agenda. He wanted to help, even if it wasn't convenient, because that's who he was. The second item on the list is they possess the confidence to serve. He says if a leader is not secure, Maxwell says it is a reflection of how they feel about themselves. And I cannot remember any time in my life where my father was not secure about anything that he did. His position in life, his actions. He was never a worrier. I don't know where I came from with that one because I'm a worrier. But I never remember a time when he lacked the confidence to do what needed to be done. He jumped in all the time and helped anyone in need. They are servant leaders. They initiate service to others. Maxwell says that if a person sees a need and initiates that service, they seize the opportunity, and that is a real leader. My friend from high school didn't ask my dad to come from work to work for her. He saw that she was struggling and volunteered to help. Retired in his mid-60s, he learned how to make pizza, work the cash register, run the front door, and he did that all because he loved my friend Lorna so much. 4, they don't care about their position or rank. They just work to help others. As far as I can remember, my father never cared or sought for any position or rank. He was the fire chief because he got elected on default. I've never witnessed him worrying about or felt the need to have a special place or position with his job and or his family or his community. He performed his job because it was community. And finally, they serve out of love. My father served his country, his family, his friends, his communities because of love. And it showed it too. My father's dad passed away when I was very little, leaving my grandmother and aunt with very little financial support or help. And it was my dad that took them grocery shopping, medical appointments, to see friends and families because he loved them. When he was a letter carrier in a town of 1,500 people, a town with an aging population, he didn't just deliver the mail to their mailbox. He opened up their doors and hand-delivered people their mail because he knew that he might be the only person that they saw that day. And truly, Jim Wilson loves people, and he showed it by serving in so many ways. So our next slide. So at this point, you're probably wondering why it took me 45 years to figure out this whole servant leader thing when I had a role model like my dad. Well, I can't explain it any other way to say that I had a different lens on looking at my father. So where did I make my mistakes? Maxwell writes in the chapter, he asks, do you lord over people or do you listen? And in my previous positions, I thought I had to be the most competent one on the team. Did I really take the time to listen to what they needed to be successful? Did I risk anything for others' benefits, or did I just watch out for myself? Because I wanted to make sure that I didn't get caught holding the bag when things went wrong. Did I really risk anything for my team? And 3, was I seeking my own way or was I serving others? In my own distorted view, I probably believed I was serving others when I made our agency look good, But was I taking the right approach? Probably could have been, should have been practicing servant leadership the entire time, helping the entire agency meet their goals. So the next slide, David. So Maxwell says to improve our service to others, we need to perform small acts. Find ways to show those you are closest to that you care. And this is a place where my dad, Jim Wilson, excelled in his own way. There is no doubt about it. Every day he would find ways to help people by doing something for his family or his community. Second, Maxwell suggests that we learn to walk slowly through the crowd. Connect with others by taking the time to talk with them, focusing on the people you meet and interact with. You know, short, quick story. I always assumed my dad was a talker. As a kid, when he would go and he would take us to the grocery store and he'd say, I'll just be a few minutes.
Olivia, come back down here with her tablet, please, for a second.
When he would go and to the grocery store to get a gallon of milk, it would take him an hour. I'm like, Dad, we're sitting in the car starving, waiting for him to come back. He stopped and talked to everyone. But looking back, my dad wasn't a talker. He was a listener. He stopped to listen to everyone. And why didn't I pick up on this kid? How did he know everything that was going on in the community and where people needed help? It's because he listened. And finally, Maxwell suggests that we move into action. Just start serving somewhere. Start with your body, and a physical action of service will catch up. So to sum things up, here's my last slide. I like this quote, only a life served in the services of others is worth living. So that is my presentation. I hope you all are inspired to look at the people you know, to see if there are areas that they are serving and where areas where things can be improved. And so just in the few minutes that we have left, if there are things that you're currently doing or what you'd like to start doing to build up your servant leadership muscles, we'd love to hear.
Jackie, that was great. I loved hearing your personal stories. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing those and being honest in doing that. I've heard it said, the joy we seek is in the service we avoid. And so oftentimes those two go together. But you're right, so much of servanthood can bring real joy and meaning to your life when you have that perspective.
Absolutely. You know, I am so much happier and more fulfilled now than I have ever been in my career in the past, just because I've learned that there are other people that need my help or that need help that can take that agenda away from my own personal agenda sometimes. So I really did learn my lesson, and I was scared a little bit of sharing it today, but hopefully you can take it to heart and it helped some way.
This was great. And I'd be interested in how people maybe approach this topic of servanthood. I mean, do you look for opportunities in the community or in your neighborhood or mentoring, or what does it look like for different people? How do you approach that? You do have to kind of clear your schedule a little bit to have time for others and other activities, right? Can't just be scheduled from morning to night for your own stuff. You do have to find some time for others. People have any examples they'd like to share in chat? Maybe someone that you consider a servant leader as well. Yeah, that the greatest generation that went off to war and came back, they did seem to have a spirit of this. That's from William, and then Stacy saying, to pray for opportunities to serve. They can sometimes be right in your neighborhood. I'm trying to make a concerted effort to get to know my neighbors, and I went Saturday morning to visit with a neighbor that I didn't know. I had scheduled an appointment with him to have a little coffee in his garage. Turns out he's a veteran, and we talked for 3 hours. Well, actually, he talked for 3 hours. I listened. He had a lot of words he needed to use, and he just appreciated someone coming down and visiting and being interested in him. So it could be even things like that. Lots of comments coming up here, Jackie. Valerie is saying, I always emphasize and recommend that individuals should volunteer because in lifting up others, you lift yourself. Mm-hmm. Although that may not be your plan. Volunteering is certainly one of the rewarding parts of life. There'll be a lot of organizations looking and seeking volunteers, I know, in the coming months. Mm-hmm. Gidget saying, my husband and I have decided we're going to start volunteering at our local food pantry. Yes, that's a great example. Stephanie says a friend retired from a teaching career working 60 plus hours a week. She now volunteers for her church, a ministerial alliance, a local food pantry, other organizations, and she still probably works 60 hours a week. Yeah, you can sure sign up for a lot of hours. That is true. But man, a reliable volunteer is worth their weight in gold.
Yeah. That's one of my goals too, is volunteering more. Finding something that I truly have an interest and passion in and just getting to work. So absolutely. And, and that was my dad's life after he retired from the post office. I think he worked still 50-hour work week, just finding things to go do and take people places. And, that's one of the things I see in a community right now is really getting people with lack of transportation that we have in Missouri, of helping get people to where they need to go. So that'll probably be where I'm at in probably the next 20 years. I'll be driving people from Worth County to their doctor's appointments. That's my end goal.
Well, I saw William's earlier post where he referenced the greatest generation, but I also know the demographics of the participants in this class. And I just want to remind everybody that at this phase in our life that we are that generation now that needs to invest in the younger generation. And if you've not noticed, narcissism is kind of a growing trend in younger generation, the selfie generations. And narcissism is certainly opposite of servanthood. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have said America has a selfishness problem. And servanthood would be opposite of that. So teaching, it doesn't come naturally. I think we're naturally selfish. Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell agreed with that. Absolutely. And that's why he says we have to be intentional. And there's a whole another topic we could get into is living with intention and doing things with intention.
That is an excellent point about being intentional about it. Mm-hmm. The servanthood just doesn't land in your lap and happen for you, does it?
No, I am proof of that.
But you do think you can improve it by practicing it and putting it into work?
It's like Maxwell says, just start somewhere. If your heart's not in it, just do the actions and your heart will catch up. And I think that absolutely that's the way to start. So.
Well, Jackie, excellent presentation today. Thank you all for joining us. I know that's a bit over our 30 minutes, but glad you've stuck with us and joined us live today. And then, of course, we have 2 more topics to finish out this whole book. Tomorrow's topic is teachability. And it's an important topic. There's actually, I actually read a book this summer called The Key to Everything. And that author's premise is that teachability is the key to everything. So big topic. Be sure and join us for these last 2. And thanks again to Jackie for being vulnerable and for the time she invested in this topic to share it with us. So thank you for joining us today. If you have questions or comments, you're welcome to stay on. Otherwise, we'll catch you on Wednesday.